Taking time out of his busy day to spend some time with us, Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, good morning to you.
Hey, good to be with you. How are you?
Good. How's everything going this morning?
Oh, I'm living, It's, what day is today? Wednesday? I don't know. I've lost time of the days. It's like,
yeah,
it's nice in D.C., but, it just, everything blurs together. But I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. You just got out of cherry blossom time, right? Or is it just starting?
Yeah, we're just getting out of it.
I've been there for that a couple of times. No, your allergies are good. I've been there a couple of times for that. You see the pictures, you see the video of it, you go, is it really that pretty? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's, usually, obviously, with, tourism down, it is what it is, but usually it's just it's a tough time to be around because it's so beautiful and it is so packed. So
it is one of my favorite memories. My dad and I, my dad being a World War II vet, was coming down to the end of the line and wanted to go to Washington to see the World War II memorial. And he and I went in 2008, and we did everything. We went everywhere. We saw the memorial. We went to Arlington, and I have a wonderful photograph of Audie Murphy's tombstone.
Wow.
And it's littered with cherry blossoms, and there are several falling as I took the photo.
That's incredible.
That's one of the most stunning spots.
It's incredible. And I'll tell you, in this time when, I'm sure we'll talk about some of it, but where there's like so much division and everything is just, quote unquote, so bad. And that really isn't as bad as we think it is. But, it's like if you go by like the World War II Museum or Memorial and, Vietnam, and you go out to Arlington, like you're talking about, and you think of your dad, right, in my grandfather's service. You realize we've been in worse times before. We've always come out of it, and it's going to take a heroic generation to save it again.
That's one of the conversations I recently had with my kids who are very plugged into what goes on in the world and news and all that. And he said, Dad, it's pretty bad. Has it ever been worse and all that? I said, I think the first person who probably said, man, things have never been worse, was just leaving a garden. I believe that phrase has been uttered by generation after generation after generation for thousands of years, depending on what was going on.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you think about, the day that Jesus went to the cross and you look at it and you're like, it's hopeless, right? And 3 days later, he rises again. You realize, he broke that sin and bondage 3 days later so we could live free. And then you come into the American history of the Revolution. We should have lost the Revolutionary War. That was not easy. We watch, all these great movies, and it seems like it was an awesome, fun time, a guaranteed outcome, and it was terrible. Civil War, I mean, you think
even
of that.
Worse.
Oh, even worse. And, and you think of Abraham Lincoln, right? Just, it would have been so, I think in his position, probably would have eventually been like, all right, let's just negotiate with the South and move on. But, he didn't. And so it's like every time a generation comes back, it's from a difficult time, and it's from leaders taking tough stands. But you always look back and go, wow, that was the generation that fixed things. And that's got to be our generation now, because I do think it's so broken in terms of our ability to talk to each other even and be kind of grown-ups that we're going to have to be the ones that overcome it. Plus, we have big challenges. You have Russia. You have China. You have Iran. It's we could be faced with something big.
Yeah, there are some big things. You mentioned Russia. I've got a little list of bullet points I wanted to bring up to you. One, Russia's stacking up nearly 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. You're not seeing a lot of reporting on this, but there it is.
Yeah. So that's you look at this is predictable. Every time Putin finds himself in domestic trouble, which he is a little bit right now. And every time, stuff like that happens, you see Russia begin to push, right? They're going to push the United States and NATO. And I think this is a combination of both domestic problems in Russia, testing the United States and NATO. And I think, quite honestly, it's likely that he could invade eastern Ukraine. And I think, given that the president is about to announce a full withdrawal from Afghanistan, which to me is nonsensical, I think it's sending the message to all around the world that America's on the retreat. It just is so memorable of, under President Obama again, that I think it actually makes Russia testing us in Ukraine more likely.
And I would imagine that we're going to look at an equal sort of testing measure going on in the Pacific.
Yes. So, there's growing concern that actually China may make a move on Taiwan soon. And I always would have discredited that and said, look, the Chinese are smart, they're not going to do it, but I've been talking to a lot of experts that really believe it's possible. And if you think about, where this could go, that's frightening. I mean, if China and the U.S. got into a war, have no doubt, U.S. would win, but we would win only if we as a country can make like a World War II level commitment to that fight. I just don't know if we have it in us right now, and I don't mean to be like, but we're so busy fighting each other and.
I think it's fair to say there's a question mark there.
Yeah, I think so too. So, but we would win in the long term, but in the short term we wouldn't, and so that would be a question for the American people.
Yeah, we don't want any part of that. So let's hope that doesn't bear any fruit. Let's go closer to home here, more domestically. You've got cities burning. You've got you got statements being made by members of Congress like, okay, we need to end policing and incarceration.
Yeah.
Rashida Tlaib yesterday. There's been quite a bit of not only blowback but agreement going on with that one, which kind of is frightening.
Yeah. So I first off shout out to losing the Rockford police chief. Great guy, and it's going to be a sad loss as he moves on to better.
Yep. Chief O'Shea's a good guy.
Yeah, great guy. And in terms of around the country, look. You can take situations like bad policing or mistaken policing, and we all know the problem nowadays is, in a country of 300-some million where everything is now taped, every time you see a situation that's bad, it is magnified a million times and put on every news station. So it seems like things like police shootings are actually on the rise when in reality we're just more aware of them in a big country. And but you can take a situation like what appears to be an officer that mistakenly thought she had her taser out. That is a tragedy. That needs more training. That was not an intentional murder. You can take the situation like the Army officer who was pulled over. That, to me, looks like a problem with the police there. And in the things I've known and seen, we can talk about that without going to the level of... I saw yesterday somebody was saying that maybe police shouldn't have guns at traffic stops. Like, come on, the insanity of it. We can support our police. We can give them the resources to have the best training, which, by the way, every one of these defund the police efforts that you see out there, what do they cut? They cut training for officers, and then they expect them to act better.
Right.
And it's incredible.
It makes no sense at all.
Yeah. I mean, and look at Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., there are more shootings than there were in the 80s, right? Back in the crack epidemic of the 80s in Washington. Not as many people are dying, and that's because of better medical equipment, and faster response time nowadays, but there's as many shootings. Washington, D.C. wants to cut the police. The guy that was drugged down the stairs, Michael Fanone, during the January 6th insurrection, he was the only narcotics officer working in D.C., the only narcotics officer because they've cut their narco division. I mean, and then we wonder why crime goes up.
Yeah, it's stunning. But to see an actual member of Congress stand up and say, that's it, policing needs to end, incarceration needs to end. So what, would just pound the gavel on anarchy and let it go?
I don't even know. I mean, you see something like that, and the funny thing is that, well, not funny, but kind of funny, is like you shake your head like, well, that person's crazy. But then that will end up picking up. I mean, there are going to be other people that now start saying that.
Yep.
And, look, that's what happens when you end policing. It's like, you see it in places around this country, but look at, the idea of homelessness, right? And what is the most compassionate thing we can do if we care about homelessness? We can help people to get their lives, on track and get a job. My dad ran a homeless shelter when I was growing up, and that's exactly what they did. It wasn't about come here and stay the night, do as many drugs as you want. We'll just make sure you're good. It was about where you can stay here, but you got to work to get your life in line. Go to L.A. and walk down the street in L.A., which I have not done, but I've seen pictures. And you just see these massive homeless camps with syringes everywhere. Go to the border of Mexico and see the number of young kids that are being trafficked, like human trafficking by the cartels for profit and left to die in the desert. And tell me there is anything compassionate about that. Sometimes justice is compassion, and that's why we have to make sure that the police are well trained, and also that they, are well equipped.
I know we're just about out of time, but I have to ask you, and it just slipped in as well. What's going on at the border?
Oh man, it's a mess. It's I think President Biden should go back to President Trump's policies of the Remain in Mexico, the safe third country issues, because what's happening is we have to have compassion for the people that are coming up. My wife is Salvadorian, and I go to El Salvador sometimes and see the depth of poverty. After COVID particularly, that's a lot of pressure now for people wanting to come up. But the reality is, if we say, you come up, you're not going to make it in, and create a safe way for them to come immigrate. That's what we all want to do, and we will starve the cartels of their money. But instead, it's just this whole virtue signaling that's leading to this crisis.
Right, and then the attempt to tie the previous administration into it.
Right, exactly. Look, the previous administration on the border was successful, and I think President Biden would be wise to replicate some of that.
Congressman, as always, I know how busy you are. Appreciate the time today. We'll look forward to our next get-together coming up in May.
Yeah, anytime, my man. Take care.
Thank you. There's Congressman Adam Kinzinger.